Lone Rider here, and I wanted to just briefly mention something. After the recent high-profile shootings at El Paso and Dayton, Ohio, there's been a renewed cry for gun control, including red flag laws. Now, the danger of these laws are legion. They basically are a shortcut in the judicial process, and like all such shortcuts, it's pregnant with abuse and lack of safeguards, etc. We saw a case in Maryland where a guy was reported, and as a result, he was shot to death by the police when they tried to grab the gun out of his hand, and it went off, panicking the police officers. Um, and at the end, after the guy's dead, the police had to shoot him, and then and he was never even accused of a criminal offense of any kind. And then at the end, the news reporter's like, we don't even know who reported him. The total lack of accountability. Um, and that's one of the things I wanted to mention just briefly about red flag laws is the likelihood of false reporting or misreporting or abuse, whatever you want to call it, is extreme. And it's enhanced by the way the gun control advocates are changing our culture with respect to firearms, right? Nowadays, among certain segments of the population, guns or anything to do with shooting sports, target shooting, owning a gun for self-defense or hunting, etc., is considered owning a gun just because it's your constitutional right, you want to exercise it. These things are considered among some people suspicious, and among some people cause for alarm. Years ago, you said to somebody, hey, I'm going to the shooting range this weekend. They'd be like, oh, cool, have a good time. Now you say that to somebody, some people, not all, there's still some normal people out there, but some people, the people who are paranoid about guns, they hear you're going to the shooting range this weekend, and they might wonder if you're planning to do a massacre or rob a bank. And that's weird. That's to me, people who think like that, there's something wrong with how you're thinking in terms of it's like you're assuming the worst case and most unlikely scenario of all. Why would you do that? It's because culturally there's been a change in how we look at guns, and that change makes it more likely that red flag laws will be abused. Red flag laws, if we were in a world where there wasn't a cultural demonization of firearms, would still be alarming, but they'd be less alarming than they are in a culture where simply saying to somebody, I'm going to the shooting range this weekend, um, you know, might cause you to get somebody calling the police on you now, even in places where there aren't red flag laws. And like I said, where there are red flag laws, we've seen that they've been abused. In fact, one might actually wonder if, when these laws get abused or somebody is erroneously reported, is it actually abuse or is that the intent? Is the intent just to make it easy for people who have a culturally stunted and paranoid view of firearm ownership to enforce that bigotry on other people and that bias and that fear and phobia on other people? Is this a way to make us all subject to the phobia of the anti-gunners, so that not only will they are they going to denounce people who support the idea of the shooting sports and firearm ownership in their news media and in their social media and this and that and the next thing in their protest, but now they're in a position to send the cops to somebody's house and get them arrested or their property seized or maybe get them killed, right? That's to say nothing of the idea of people, somebody took your parking space, you have a grudge, well, call the police and tell them about the red flag law. We already have a problem with the police being maliciously called on people. I was actually once pulled over in my car because somebody on a cell phone in front of me was swerving and they nearly ran over a bicyclist. And I beeped at them to warn them that they were going to hit that bicyclist off to the side. Later that day, I was pulled over by the police in my own town, and I said, what's going on? And the police said, there were like three of them surrounding the car, and they said, somebody called this car in and said that you were driving erratically. And when I asked what town it was from, and they told me the town, I was like, oh, that was the town where I had to beep at the guy who nearly hit the bicyclist. So we already know that sometimes people call the police on you maliciously. Sometimes it has very tragic repercussions. Fortunately, in my case, the police were like, yeah, this is probably what happened. It was probably the guy did it out of spite. And then we all, nothing happened. But, something could definitely have happened. If the police are told that, they're going to approach a dangerous individual and then somebody could get hurt. You could get hurt. The police could get hurt. We've seen in red flag laws at the state level, there was a case in Maryland. Again, a guy is shot to death on his own front stoop and nobody's held accountable. They won't even say who reported him if they know. So this is a serious thing, and I honestly think we should say, look, maybe some of these people mean well. Maybe they're just trying to find whatever they can do to prevent shootings in the future. But whatever you can do doesn't mean up to and including getting innocent people shot by the police on their own front stoop. Whatever you can do means whatever you can do within the constraints and limits of constitutional government without infringing on the rights and lives of innocent people. Right? So my thing about red flag laws is they're very dangerous. I hope we should get rid of the ones we have. We certainly shouldn't be looking at expanding them. And especially in the climate, the cultural climate related to firearms that the gun control people have fostered, they've made it so red flag laws are even more dangerous. Red flag laws would still be alarming without this cultural demonization of firearms that the gun control advocates have fostered, but maybe not as much so. But with this, when people are willing to say that, if you make a post on Facebook saying you went target shooting or hunting today, that you're going to be looked at by the police because that's suspicious, right? And some kid posts a picture, he went to the shooting range with his father, and they call him into the principal's office because now they think he's a threat. Look, with the cultural demonization of firearms we already have in this country, red flag laws are even more dangerous. If you wanted us to consider red flag laws, you'd have to undo that cultural demonization of firearms, get us back to where we were years ago, where if somebody went target shooting or hunting or owned a gun for self-defense or because it was their constitutional right, that was normal. You know what? Get us to that point, and maybe we could even talk about red flag laws. There'd still be a lot of problems with them, but maybe we could at least talk about them. But they shouldn't even be on the table in a country where the same people who are promoting the idea of reporting somebody to the police under a red flag law have also worked to make it much more likely that people get reported simply for doing something normal, because the cultural demonization of firearms has made it seem less than normal to these people, and unfortunately to large segments of the population who are beholden to the cultural view that they're pushing. And I know people who are younger than me. I know people who are my age. I know people who are older than me. It's interesting when I talk to the people who are older. Almost all of these people have experience with a time where owning a firearm was just something people did, and going shooting was just something you did, like you might go golfing or bicycling. And the gun control advocates have been culturally trying to kill that view of firearms, at the same time as they want to make it easier to report somebody for something that's suspicious. Wait a minute. You want to make it easier to report people for something that's suspicious, and you're redefining normal behavior by law-abiding citizens as suspicious, or at least culturally alarming. Why don't I trust that? Why don't I trust that that's going to be done with some regard for the safety and rights of people? Gee, I wonder, right? So anyway, that's my take on red flag laws. It's nothing new. These problems with them have long existed, but since they're being brought up again, it's only fair that I bring up the downside with them again. And let's be clear, nobody wants crazy people to have guns. But my problem is these people don't seem to be concerned about crazy people having guns. They seem to be concerned about anybody having